tried all the rest? Learn from the best. Join WDGLC.com today.
Hey there everybody, Wayne Defrancesco here, and this is Paula Creamer. So we're going to take a look at Paula's swing. She's now ranked 13th in the world. I think she was as high up as 2 or 3 at one point. She really started her career off with a bang. She was Junior of the Year back in 2003-4, Amateur of the Year, and then Rookie of the Year in 2005. She had 8 wins in her first 3 years on the tour, up to the end of 2008. And since then has really, I guess you would call it, struggled. She's only won 1 tournament, but the good news was that was the U.S. Open, so that's a good thing. She's had 12 top 10s in majors and has an awesome record, 11-3-5 in the Solheim Cup, so you know she's a tough competitor. But with only a 1 win in the last 4.5 years, kind of wonder what's keeping her back. One thing maybe, as I was looking through swings, trying to find swings of her on YouTube, there were more pictures of her in bathing suits than there were of her golf swing. So certain distractions. She is well endorsed by a number of companies and certainly doing well commercially. So let's take a look at her swing. And as usual, I have full respect for all these good players, and I'm not trying to be critical of the swing, but I try to do an objective look-see. And when the record shows that maybe she's not performing as well as people might have expected, or the promise that she showed early has not been fulfilled, then there might be some reasons for that. So I've got a couple of driver swings. These are the ones where the camera was the stillest, although not perfect. So what I usually do to check is I'll draw a horizontal and a vertical line on something in the picture, and then if I run the swing, I'll see where the lines end up. So here you see we have a camera that was probably blowing in the wind a little bit. It doesn't seem to be. It seems better than a handheld, but not perfectly stable. You can see the ball position is pretty forward here, so you wonder if the camera was a little bit back to the left toward her right foot. But anyway, because those lines aren't moving around, we can see a couple of significant things in the swing. Also, these swings are spaced around different times, and players always work on different stuff, so these are just snapshots of a point in time. Maybe a general thing about the swing, and then again it may not, but it's always interesting to watch what you have in front of you.
Learn the pivot compression golf swing. Join WDGLC.com today.
And analyze. So one thing we'll note about Paula is her excellent shaft control in the forward swing. Again, a significant amount of lowering. And what's also interesting about her lowering, which is different from a lot of players, is the amount of forward movement along with the lowering. So when you look at the men's swings, you see this all the time. You see the compression into the ground, and then you see the second lowering into the transition to get the hips moving forward. Now, what you don't normally see, but you do in some, if you think of Jay Overton, or if you go back to Byron Nelson, you'll see the head drop through impact. I think part of that has to do with learning as a kid to keep your head down and eyes on the ball. That's one thing. And then that sensation of release, of extending the right arm straight out as far as you can. when we look at her swing from the front view, we'll see that the right shoulder ends up well in front of the hips, which is indicative of a few things, and we'll talk about that in a second. So if we look at the nature of that forward movement, if you ask me, and you're kind of asking me because you're watching this, I would say that it's due to a little bit of a lack of depth in the right leg. Although when we watch this go back, the right hip doesn't come forward of the box line. In fact, it bumps back a hair there. You can see it go behind the line and then inch back onto the line. So we do see a fairly erect posture. And we also see fairly symmetrical knee movement there, and already the head is tipped a little forward in the backswing. The shaft, now this camera is situated pretty good here, so shaft is slightly underplane. You can tell that that's the case because the head is much lower than the hands, passing by at parallel to the target line, and that gives her left arm parallel position a super deep look, kind of like a Kuchar or that old Venturi swing that he switched to when he pulled the club way behind him. So that gives it a flattish look at the top. The wrist is definitely flat. She does not have a strong grip, so when the wrist gets flat, almost bowed like that, the club face still doesn't really appear to be super shut there. So she really leans into it in the forward swing. There's some other swings of hers where she just doesn't have nearly the angle there, and I'll show you one of those in a minute, which would suggest that she has definitely, worked on stuff and made some changes. But look at the nice arc of the shaft into impact there. And that's something that you see with good players. They've got the club arcing into the ball on a nice angle, and thus the release action is not very complicated. You can see her hips back really nicely in the box while her head is well forward. But as she releases the club, you can see there's no real effort to go around to the left. She likes to extend that right arm straight out there and really chase it hard. So if we watch here from the front view, so if you look at the red line I drew on the stake in the background there, the red line is slightly forward of where it started, so we'll give her hips a little more forwardness to them. But you can see we've got a little bit of a loss out of the box in the backswing, just a little bump to the right. And when that happens, you can see that her head, if anything, is hanging to the left. And now as she returns, look at that really great catch of the club. It's kind of one of her signatures, is that whipping action at the top where she catches it and bends that shaft. Very dynamic at the top. You can see the shaft really kick from down the line to a much flatter position right here. Lots of angle early, but very, very little hip drive, meaning that the hips aren't very laterally forward. And the thing that I notice there is that, and I see this a lot when I teach, is that without that lateral hip movement combining with the rotation, you end up with the arms advancing and not quite being pulled by the midsection. So when the weight moves from the ground the upper body leans over on top of the legs, and what you get here is a certain type of look where the left shoulder juts out past the hips. I'll draw it here for you. There's an inversion here in the waist and then back out there. So it's something I really work on with good players, is I really try to get them to advance the waist so that at this point in the swing you would see a nice curve here with the waist, which is back over here, more pushed forward. And what that does is it sets up more of a pulling sensation, and the arms won't advance and buckle like that. I think it allows for a more natural extension through the ball. Go back to a throwing motion, and if you were throwing a ball, you would probably lift that foot up and plant it over here somewhere, and the hips would naturally move well forward, and that would be how you drag that right arm in front of you. But here you don't see much of that. Now, take a look at the left heel. Into impact, and you'll see it raise up and twist backwards. So that's an indication that that leg is straightening too quickly, and that's going to cost, as far as the speed you're going to be able to achieve down at impact. And then in the finish, another thing that I really try to get people to do is to use their glutes into impact and through, so that the belt buckle would push forward and the right shoulder wouldn't chase forward like that. So I kind of call that the pointer dog finish. And to me, it's just, you can see that there's really no squeeze and push in the big muscles in the upper legs and the butt to get that thing through the ball. So not going to be as big of a deal with the driver because of the sweeping nature of the blow. But if we go back to the iron shot, yeah, let's take a look. When you get that lack of leg movement, now this camera's moving around a little bit, so you kind of see in the background, I mean, there's definitely forward movement, but not much, as that leg straightens up pretty quick. So as the hands approach, you can see the club give. It's down here now. Now that's not a particularly strong position for a tour caliber player there, and when you look at the release where the shaft is up between the arms, a little bit of flippiness going on in there. And then again, the chase, which to me shows a little bit of a problem using the hips. So again, you can see what we saw in the driver is a tiny bit of right slide in the hips going back. The head hangs forward. The arms pull down because the hips don't have a chance to get driving and leading. So what do you get? You get a little bit of this detachment here. And it's just not using the muscles in the lower and mid back, which are big and can really help wind up the swing. So what you would call this probably here is a little bit of a breakdown in a kinetic link. So if they put it on the 3D, you'd probably find that the sequencing would not be quite what you might like. It's a little different view. And again, if you watch the right leg, it's not going to get very deep, and then the head's going to tip forward, but very dynamic, really good shaft control, opening up like crazy. That's really nice. So if I was going to prescribe anything for this particular swing, it would have a lot to do with what's going on in her midsection here. I mean, people started to call that the core a few years ago, but I guess I'm talking about all the stuff in the trunk, all the leg movement, and not just the stomach as a core, but we're talking about thighs, hips, glutes, lats, obliques, abs, everything. So what I'd be saying here is that, hey, let's eliminate that little slide and try to right load the head a little bit. And then let's really work on driving the hips forward, keeping the head back, and let's get some feeling of pushing off the ground down here and stretching the muscles in the upper left side, and then, or in the lower back on the left side, and then up into the upper and pulling the club down so that the arms wouldn't buckle. And then in the finish, if we were still driving with the hips, the butt would push forward and the finish would be further forward here, and the head would be back a little bit. I think that would really play nicely with the irons. Simply because the goal would be to get the hips more over this way. So I'd like to add some space here, get the club up this way, get the hands more forward at impact, so that after she hits the ball, the club would be here, and then more here, and not up there. More compression on the ball, better ball flight control, and more distance as well. All right, so again, great player. Those are just my observations, and as always, got to root for the good players.